Well, here we are on Easter Sunday. Easter Sunday for we Christians looms large in our lives and in our imaginations, and we have probably most of us a clear picture, a clear understanding of what Easter Sunday is, formed from memories of Easter's past. And those memories teach us and tell us that Easter is a cheery, happy, upbeat time. The decorations for Easter are usually in pastel colors, and the celebration itself, after all, takes place after the long winter and the sparse time of Lent. We associate Easter with the freshness of spring. We often feel at Easter like we have turned a corner and are coming down the home stretch of our year into the slower pace of summer. Our spirits usually feel at least a little bit lighter. We celebrate because we can enjoy once again whatever we have given up for Lent. So Easter Sunday often feels like a long overdue celebration, a release from darkness. This Easter, of course, feels much different. We are living in a very uncertain time. In the shadow of COVID-19, we do not know exactly how we are supposed to act. We are prevented from feeling the excitement and energy that comes simply from gathering as a crowd. Large groups, as we know from experience, large groups bring energy and excitement and anticipation to a moment that just can't be replicated by ourselves at home. And sadly and honestly, we are all struggling with doubts and with confusion. This Easter feels very different because of the uncertainty, because we feel in the dark. In that way, though, it is very much like the Easter experienced by the first followers of Jesus. On that very first Easter Sunday, the apostles and other followers of Jesus were not outside the tomb, joyfully waiting for him to rise from the dead. No, when Jesus died on Good Friday, they thought that was the end of all their hopes and dreams. They believed that all had been lost. For years they had followed him and been amazed by him. They were amazed by his poise and sense of purpose and mission. They saw him work incredible miracles. With their own eyes, they had seen him heal the sick, give sight to the blind man, hearing to the deaf, and speech to the mute. With their own eyes, they had seen him feed 5,000 people with 5 loaves and 2 fish. They had seen Jesus do these things with their own eyes, and so they came to believe. They believed that he was someone special. They came to believe that connecting their lives to his life would make their life a whole lot better. They believed that if they followed him, all their hopes and dreams would be fulfilled. They came to believe that he had been sent from God as their long-awaited Messiah. They saw his power and thought that as the Messiah, he would unleash that power. They saw his magnetism and his way with crowds, and so on Palm Sunday, when he rode into Jerusalem on a donkey, they believed that this was his moment. He was going to finally galvanize the crowds and lead them in a rebellion against Rome that would finally overthrow their rule and establish once again the Israel that God had promised, an independent Israel. They believed that he was the Messiah, and they put their hopes in him. Then on Good Friday, those hopes and dreams were dashed. The crowds turned on Jesus rather than following him in rebellion. They cried out, "Crucify him!" Rather than the Romans being defeated by his strength, they mocked him, nailed him to a cross, and placed his limp, lifeless body in a tomb. It was game over. So what were the apostles and followers of Jesus to do? They didn't know. They weren't sure what to do. Their whole lives had been disrupted. They were filled with fear for the future. Everyone knew they had followed Jesus. Now that he had been executed as an enemy of the state, they felt they too were in danger. So they hid in darkness and despair. Darkness, despair, and disillusionment. Fear, dismay, anxiety. They had great concern about the future and a loss of hope. That was the emotional state of the first followers of Jesus on that first Easter Sunday morning. They were not waiting with hopeful anticipation for Jesus to rise from the dead. But then something happened that totally changed their perspective. It shifted their emotion from despair to hope. They moved from fear to faith. They moved out of disillusionment to new dreams and confidence in the future. They had a total change of view, not because the external circumstances had changed at all. To the outsider, everything seemed the same, but they saw and experienced something that changed everything. We have 4 separate written accounts dating back 2,000 years of what the earliest disciples experienced and saw that changed their point of view. That doesn't seem like a big deal to us, but paper and ink, or parchment for that matter, were not as plentiful 2,000 years ago as they are now. They were expensive. Writing anything, cost big bucks. The autobiographies and writings of wealthy people from ancient times have come down to us because only the wealthy could afford to produce books. But Jesus was not wealthy, nor were his disciples. In fact, Jesus had nowhere to lay his head. He didn't even own a home. Yet, people went to great expense to write about his life. They felt they simply had to spread the news about him. One of the people who felt he had to tell the story was the gospel writer, John. John shares his story of what changed for him on that first Easter morning. On the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the tomb. So she ran and went to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved, and said to them, "They have taken the Lord from the tomb, and we do not know where they put him." Mary goes to the tomb on Easter Sunday morning. She goes to the tomb because she goes to the tomb not because she expects that Jesus has risen from the dead. She goes because the Jewish people had a custom of mourning at a loved one's tomb for 3 days after death. Mary Magdalene loved Jesus so much that she felt it was her responsibility to mourn his death. John tells us that it was still dark. John's gospel is well crafted. He drops in little details that seem inconsequential to us or that we could easily skip over. The darkness is one of those details. This not only describes the time of day, but the emotional and intellectual state of the disciples. Their hearts and minds were very much in the dark. Mary assumes, mistakenly, that someone has taken the body and the burial clothes. Grave robbery, in fact, was such a problem in the first century that one of the Roman Caesars had to make it a capital offense, in other words, an offense punishable by death. The passage continues. Then Peter and the other disciple set out and went toward the tomb. The two were running together, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent down to look in and saw the linen wrappings lying there, but he did not go in. With this news from Mary, Peter and another disciple jump up and begin running to the tomb to see what has happened. This shocking news that Jesus' body is gone fills them with adrenaline. They have to go and see for themselves what is going on. John writes about Peter and the other disciple. The other disciple is John. Here's something you need to know about John's gospel. John never says I or me, and in fact never even refers to himself as John. Instead, he talks about himself informally in the third person, calling himself either the beloved disciple or, as in this case, as the other disciple. Both Peter and John run to the tomb when they hear the news from Mary. John, being the younger guy and so naturally in better shape, gets there before Peter. And it tells us that he looked inside the tomb but didn't go in it. You know why he didn't go in? Because it was a tomb. Who wants to go in a tomb? But there's more to it than that. What he sees is not what he expected to see. He expected to see a completely empty tomb. He would have assumed there was nothing there. If grave robbers had taken the body, the burial clothes would not have been there. The burial clothes were what was valuable. It would be like someone stealing your wallet, but leaving behind the cash and the credit cards and everything in it. No robber would do that. So it was clear the body had not been stolen. And no person would take the burial clothes off the body and then leave the clothes there. If someone had taken the body, they would have taken the clothes as well. He couldn't make sense of what he was seeing. John is a reflective person, so he just stops and examines the situation. Peter, as we know from the Gospels, is not. He is more impulsive and impetuous. So John tells us. Then Simon Peter came, following him, and went into the tomb. He saw the linen wrappings lying there, and the cloth that had been on Jesus' head not lying with the linen wrappings, but rolled up in a place by itself. Peter is the more impetuous person, so he runs into the tomb. He doesn't stop at first to examine the situation. He sees that the burial clothes are there, but the cloth that had covered his head is rolled up in a separate place, as if someone had taken the time to fold it up. So it's more evidence that the burial clothes are there, but there is no body. Then the other disciple, who reached the tomb first, also went in, and he saw and believed. John saw and believed what? He saw deeper into the evidence and believed Jesus had risen from the dead. He believed the tomb was empty, not because the body had been stolen, but because Jesus had risen from the dead. Many times Jesus had predicted his death and resurrection. When you read through the Gospels, Jesus constantly tells his followers what is coming, and it just washes right over them. They don't get it. John had heard Jesus say it several times, and he never paid much attention at all. But now, seeing the evidence before him, he comes to believe that Jesus rose from the dead. And in that moment of belief, everything changed for John. Faith and hope go together. Faith is belief that God exists. Faith is trust in God's character, that what he says is true. The Christian faith is based not on the Bible, but on the person of Jesus Christ and the event of his resurrection from the dead. Let me say that again. The Christian faith is based not on the Bible, but on the person of Jesus Christ and the event of his resurrection from the dead. The early Christians came to believe that Jesus rose from the dead. They came to believe in his resurrection not out of some kind of wishful thinking, but because of what they saw and experienced. Out of their experience, they came to believe in something they never thought possible. As they believed in Jesus' resurrection, they were filled with hope for the future. Hope is a confident expectation that goodness is coming. It is desire to experience God's promises. Hope corresponds to our natural desire for happiness. We are all, each of us, on a kind of happiness quest. Hope is confidence that we ultimately find our happiness and fulfillment in God. Hope is faith directed toward the future. Faith believes God exists and has the power to bring goodness into our lives. Hope is a confidence that he will bring that blessing into our lives, especially in times of darkness. Hope keeps us from discouragement and sustains us in times of darkness. Faith is the foundation of hope. Faith is a gift. Faith in Jesus' resurrection is first and foremost a gift that comes from the grace of God. Without God's intervention and revelation, faith in him is impossible. You cannot make yourself have faith. You cannot give yourself faith. You have to receive it. It has to be revealed to you by God. We cannot see this on our own. To help us grow in faith, God sets up scenarios that are suited to our personalities, interests, and experiences. When you read through the resurrection accounts in John's Gospel, you discover that no two people come to faith in exactly the same way. Each person is approached by Jesus differently. Each is given different types of evidence to come to faith in the resurrection. Some people need only a little bit of evidence, as is the case with John. Others are much more skeptical and demand to see greater evidence, such as touching Jesus' wounds like the Apostle Thomas. God wants to give each of us the gift of faith, but we all have different trajectories and paths. We all need something different to receive faith in Jesus' resurrection. This is why it is wrong for Christians to ever judge other people who do not have faith in God. We have received that faith as a gift. We didn't earn it, we received it. When you receive a gift, you don't judge other people who have not received it. Instead, you are grateful for it. While faith is a gift, that does not mean that we are completely passive. We have to explore the evidence. We have to have a willingness to receive the gifts God gives us to bring us to faith in Jesus and his resurrection. We explore the things in our life that don't make sense, like Mary, Peter, and John did not believe that Jesus had risen from the dead. They thought his body had been stolen. They went to the tomb to see for themselves what had happened, to examine the evidence. Faith comes from a willingness to examine the evidence. While faith goes beyond our rational capacities, it does not contradict them. Faith is not irrational. Faith means believing what we can't see based on the evidence we can see. You cannot get all the way to real faith through reasoning alone. Yet faith is not less than rational either. You can't get to real faith without reason and thinking. Why? Because mature faith is an act of the whole person. The early disciples were just as incredulous of Jesus' resurrection as modern people would be. They required the same kind of multiple sightings and hands-on eyewitness experience that we would require in order to convince them that Jesus was really alive. And in this respect, the narratives fit perfectly with what we know historically of those cultures. While these ancient cultures did not hold, as many modern people do, that miracles are impossible, resurrection was equally implausible and unimaginable to them, as it is for most people today. They needed evidence and a willingness to explore the evidence to come to faith in Jesus and his resurrection. As they explored the evidence, they came to believe. They came to believe so much in the resurrection that they were willing to die for that belief. They didn't believe and find evidence for their belief. They experienced evidence of the resurrection and were willing to come to the conclusion that Jesus really had risen. Now, over the next 4 weeks, we are going to look at the evidence and experiences of the early Christians and the hope that brought into their lives. Faith and hope are two things that we desperately need right now. They are available. So I want you to make a few commitments to help you deepen your faith and get the most out of the next few weeks. 1, commit to join us here online. I know we're in an environment where no one's going to look at you and say, I didn't see you at Mass on Sunday, but commit to be here. Join us online. This is a series you will want to be part of. It will help deepen your faith and give you hope for the future. Second, I would encourage you to read the Gospel of John, just chapters 20 and 21. Read them over the next week. You can read them both in about 10 minutes. Read them a little bit each day, or read them over and over again, whatever you prefer. If you already believe, these verses will strengthen and bolster your faith. If you don't believe, or maybe aren't sure yet, it is a great place to explore the evidence. Faith in Jesus' resurrection brought the earliest followers of Jesus from despair to hope, from fear to confidence in the future. It will do the same for you.